Well, hello everyone, and welcome back to another Marvel Ultimate Alliance 3 video. Today, we are finishing out the Danger Room segments with the final and highest difficulty, that being the Omega difficulty Danger Room. And this one ramps up the difficulty to the maximum. As you'll see here, once the room actually loads up, you'll see that training level Omega is at a level 300 difficulty, and it looks fairly similar to what we saw with the Epsilon Rift in terms of the mechanics and how it works. As with every other iteration of the Danger Room, we have 3 different rounds that we'll need to progress through. And after each one, if we are able to win successfully, we can choose to enable ourselves with an overall enhancement, which really tends to make things pretty easy. Now, because of the heightened difficulty here, I've noticed that the loading times, at least right here off the bat, do tend to take a little bit longer. But as we make our way into this, we should be able to see more specifically what we're having to deal with. And the difficult thing here is that our opponents also have increased damage output, even though they are just, AI or computer controlled characters. You'll see that they tend to take things a little bit more seriously than, not that we're not taking things seriously, but they definitely make things quite a bit more difficult. And you'll see here that right off the bat, we're lagging behind pretty bad. But that's mainly because I'm choosing to focus on the Danger Room objectives, specifically seeing if we can get ourselves some of these synergy attacks put in, because that's going to help us make sure that we can kind of keep pace with the opponents as we go through. You'll see we have yet to defeat an opponent, as they have 11 opponents taken down by the time we get our first one. And at this stage, we're now looking to see if we can continue in inhibiting our opponents. By using our jumping 7 times, we are able to afflict the opponent with our elemental or our object damage decreases. And the really nice one that we can add in here is guarding 6 times, which you'll see is what I'm currently doing with Thanos Infinite there. And that afflicted the opponent with the Pulverizer, which is that Danger Room hazard that cannot be destroyed. That's the piston that drops down from the ceiling periodically throughout the duration of the match, which definitely makes things pretty difficult on our opponents. We're now trying to use some of our synergy attacks to take down the opponents. That would spawn in a Shredder Sphere, which is the sphere that has a gravitational pull towards the center, and then outreaches with some of the buzzsaw animations there, which are less fun, all things considered. So the basic attacks used to defeat our opponents will instill a elemental capacitor, and that's going to be the easier one for us to focus on at this stage, as the synergy attack in defeating enemies is going to time out before anyone can claim anything. Defeating infected opponents will be an interesting one to see if we can track down. We may not be able to do that one, but at this stage I'm looking to see if we can make up for some lost ground, because we're lagging a little bit behind in terms of the opponents that we need to be defeating, as the objective is to defeat the most amount of enemies. And we have 30 seconds left on the clock at this stage, and we're still a couple of enemies behind. Fortunately, we've had damage ramping up, and we've got some detrimental effects applied over to our opponents. So we're going to unleash our extreme attacks for the final time of this round, and that should hopefully bolster us to the area where we can claim the victory here. And we are just shy of that mark currently, but we now have the lead with 1 enemy more than our opponent defeated, which is a huge relief, because I wouldn't want to have to go through the next section with a lack of a benefit here. So I'm personally going to focus on the extreme attack damage boost, because we're going to be relying on our extreme attack a lot to finalize some of these areas here. Now, the second room is one that we've also seen before. This is reaching a destination and defeating all of the enemies. And my general recommendation here is keep an eye on the objectives wherever and whenever you can, but also you really just want to see if you can get to the end destination as quickly as humanly possible. And we do have a couple of short and slight mishaps here, but you will see and experience what we're dealing with there as we progress through. So I was initially going to speed right past here, but where we were able to use some basic attacks to defeat some of our opponents and inflict a detriment over to our opposing team, that's what I elected for. So now we can kind of surge past where we were at in order to get the next benefit put in place here. We now need to defeat 2 powerful enemies instead of 2 regular enemies, and that is going to be accomplished down here at the end. There are 2 powerful enemies kind of safeguarding the door, and the thing that we need to be cautious and wary of here is that both of these opponents will explode upon being defeated. And honestly, that's kind of where I messed up, because you'll see I do end up taking down the opponents. I missed that first one in the large explosion that's caused, but the second one causes me to take that hit, and that is less than ideal. So at this stage, Thanos Infinite, he's very, very far ahead of the rest of the pack. So we need to get up as quickly as we can. And since we are nowhere near getting our extreme attacks online due to not engaging in combat hardly at all, we now have defense down 3 stages, which is certainly less than ideal. So let's get Thanos Infinite back on his feet and make our way into the next room. We've now been afflicted with Bind 3. You can get out of this by using or mashing across the buttons of the controller, and that's where we see that we have Thanos free from that detriment, despite the particle effect that is still active across his lower torso there. Now we are moving into the final section before the actual confrontation room, and you'll see that as soon as we have the gate taken down, we just need to get out of here as quickly as we can and into the final section. Now, we are unfortunately unable to take down our opponents here, which means that we ended up getting confused, which that's just never a fun effect to have to deal with because it leaves you staggering and zipping all over the room. But fortunately, the only thing that we need to do at this stage is take out the opponents in this final area, which we should be able to do a fair chunk of that with our extreme attacks here, as well as regen some of our health back up, which is really nice because we're still suffering from the defense down. We also are currently experiencing an EP draining effect, and that is less than fun to have to deal with as well. We'll pull the remainder of our enemies into the center of the room, and with a couple of ability and synergy attacks, finalize the last of them and claim our victory here with about 25% ahead of the clearance rate in comparison to what our opponents were doing. So that does work very well. Nothing really speaking to me here any stronger than that extreme damage boost. So we're going to claim that one yet again, as we will be riding this into not only this section of defeating 200 enemies, but also the final section. And yes, there's a little bit of a spoiler here, but we do have the Dark Phoenix protocol after this room as well that we'll need to take into effect. And it's always a little bit nerve-wracking because Dark Phoenix is a very powerful boss character. So we're just waiting for the room to start up, and we are going to rinse and repeat the same strategy that you've seen us do many a time before, where we are going to pull our opponents into the center of the room with the Graviton Surge, and then I'm using undercharged versions of Thanos Infinite's dash attack there to get through those 9 synergy attacks, or ability attacks there, and afflict the detriment to our opponents. And we're already pulling ahead quite substantially here, to the point where I'm not super concerned about our opponents catching up, and we're going to be able to win this third section very handily. We now need to use our synergy attacks, and since Thanos Infinite does not synergize with any of our teammates, we're going to need to switch off of him as soon as our extreme attacks have finished detonating and get those extreme attacks off, or those synergy attacks off, I should say, in a quick time, manner, and fashion there. Unfortunately, we did end up with the shock debilitation on ourselves there from the danger room hazard, but we can make up for that and get the extreme attacks or the synergy attacks leveled out and incur that reflection protocol 3 onto our opponents, which is going to be very nice as it will cause them to take more damage as they are attempting to deal damage to the opponents. We now are reaching the 70% mark, and we've just got to finish out these attacks, finish out taking down the opponents that are currently in the arena, and our extreme attacks are charging very, very quickly, so this should be easier to do than it is actually to say in this case. We're now into the last 10%, and I'm going to resort to using a couple of our thrown items to take out the remaining of our opponents, and that is going to be all she wrote. Now you'll see that with this final throw, we've got all of the enemies defeated, and we are greeted with that dialogue of the Dark Phoenix Threat Protocol. And that does not bode well for anyone involved, because she's just not fun to have to deal with. But we've got the strategy worked out at this point, so we should be able to deal with her pretty well and take her out as we have many a time before. So we're going to walk right up to her and detonate our extreme attacks, because we need to get in whatever and wherever amount of damage we can right off the bat here. That's going to provide us with a nice buffer of about 20% damage with all of those extreme attacks as soon as they have fully maxed out their duration. And it's always nice to avoid the damage coming from the different abilities and then just the general stage being on fire over the course of this fight. We're now seeing that the power has been modified or amplified. There wasn't really an objective as far as I saw in that, but we're just trying to make sure we don't get face rolled too hard with these attacks. Though for whatever reason I am very low on my energy points, which is why you see that I'm having some difficulty in layering through some of my synergies here. Though we do manage to land a couple of synergy attacks with Wolverine, which works really well for us, and upon detonating our extreme attacks yet again, we should be able to get her down another substantial amount of her health there. We now have stagger damage increased, which is going to do very well for us once we get Phoenix down to that stagger area for what could be the final time. And we now need to layer into her just a couple more times to assure that we can claim the victory here. We're into the last 10%, and with a few final attacks from the remainders of our team and one final synergy here from Wolverine, we have claimed ourselves the victory and finished out our runs of the Danger Rooms. So if you enjoyed this series, please feel free to leave a like. Don't forget to subscribe for more daily content as I bring videos from many different games to you each and every day. And we'll be back tomorrow with the next episode of our Marvel Avengers for PlayStation 4 playthrough. Thanks again for watching, and I hope that you have a fantastic rest of your day.